You know, when you hear the name Gandhi in India, your mind probably jumps straight to a massive political dynasty, right? We're talking about a family that's given the country 3 prime ministers, a family that has literally shaped modern Indian history for generations. But here's the thing. There's a missing chapter in that story. A name that's right at the foundation of it all, but somehow is almost completely unknown.
So, who was this Gandhi that an entire nation and, maybe even his own family just forgot? I mean, think about it. At the very root of this incredibly powerful family tree is a name that's just been wiped from public memory. And it's more than just a weird historical fact. It's kind of tragic that the man who gave the dynasty its famous name is now just a footnote. Today, we're diving into the story of Feroze Gandhi.
The story we all know usually kicks off right here with Jawaharlal Nehru. He was India's first and longest-serving prime minister, the patriarch of the whole dynasty.
And of course, it continues with his incredibly powerful daughter, Indira Gandhi. She became the country's first and, so far, only female prime minister, and was just one of the most dominant leaders of her time.
From there, the political mantle was passed to her sons, Rajiv and Sanjay, who carried it into the next generation, and then came their own children. It's a legacy we're all familiar with.
But what about Indira's husband, the man whose surname the dynasty actually carries, Feroze Gandhi? He wasn't just some side character, Nehru's son-in-law or Indira's husband. He was a freedom fighter, a journalist, and a true Democrat in his own right.
And this chart, wow, it really just hammers home how completely he's been erased. Get this, in a country where you've got something like 500 government schemes, roads, stadiums, you name it, all named after Nehru and Indira, Feroze Gandhi's name is on, a couple of local colleges and markets? That's it. It's a staggering difference. So it makes you ask, who was this guy and why on earth was he forgotten? To figure that out, we really have to step out of the huge shadow cast by the Nehru family and try to uncover the man himself. And the best place to start is by busting some of the myths that have grown around him.
All right, so first things first, we got to tackle a huge myth that's been floating around for decades. There's this persistent rumor that Feroze was actually Muslim, and that his name was conveniently changed for political reasons. But the facts? They tell a totally different story. The truth is, Feroze Jahangir Gandhi was born into a Parsi family. And if you need proof, well, his grave is in a Parsi cemetery in Prayagraj. Can't get much clearer than that. Way before he was ever connected to the Nehrus, Feroze was already a patriot. At just 20 years old, he dove headfirst into India's freedom struggle. By the time he was 21, his fiery activism had already gotten him thrown in jail 3 times. He was charismatic, a great speaker, and he quickly became a really popular youth leader in the party. And it was this deep passion for India's freedom that would eventually lead him to the most defining relationship of his entire life.
He met Indira Nehru while they were both in London back in the 1930s, and what started as a friendship grew into love. But their marriage wasn't exactly straightforward. Her father, Jawaharlal Nehru, was actually against it at first. He kind of saw Feroze as just a commoner, a simple Parsi boy. But Feroze's dedication eventually won him over, and they got married in 1942. After independence, though, that fairy tale started to fall apart.
This is really where you see their paths start to split. Indira moved to Delhi to be her father's official hostess and his right-hand political aide. Feroze, on the other hand, was elected as a member of parliament from Raebareli. He was a fiercely independent man, and he was absolutely determined to build his own identity. He flat out refused to be known simply as the prime minister's son-in-law. And this, right here, was the start of a deep rift between them.
And it was in Parliament that Feroze Gandhi truly made his mark, not as a privileged member of the ruling family, but as its most fearless and outspoken critic.
Okay, so this is where he really shines. He basically took on 3 huge crusades. First up, he exposed this massive corruption scandal, the Mundra scandal. And get this, he single-handedly forced his own government's powerful finance minister to resign. That's gutsy. Second, he saw how private insurance companies were taking advantage of people and fought to nationalize life insurance, which led to the creation of the LIC, an institution that's a financial pillar in India even today. And third, he was a huge champion for a free press, and even helped set up the Press Club of India.
During that big corruption debate, another politician tried to shut him up by reminding him he was Nehru's son-in-law. And Feroze's reply was legendary. He stood up and said this. It just perfectly sums up who he was. His loyalty was always to the nation first, not to any family or party.
And that fearlessness, it went all the way into his own home.
In 1959, Indira was the Congress president, and she pushed through this really undemocratic move to dismiss an elected state government. Well, Feroze called her out on it directly. At the dinner table, right in front of her father, Nehru, he was the first person to call her a dictator. It was a chillingly accurate warning of what would come years later.
So when you look at a track record like this, a man who fearlessly held his own government's feet to the fire, the question just gets bigger and more urgent. How in the world was he so completely written out of the story? Well, a big part of the reason was just sheer tragedy. In 1960, right at the peak of his influence, Feroze Gandhi had a sudden heart attack and died. He was only 48 years old. All his work was cut short, and his story was left tragically unfinished. But his early death was really just one piece of the puzzle. His independent streak and his constant criticism of his own government, well, that made him some powerful enemies. Then, after he died, Indira focused all her energy on solidifying her father's legacy, which didn't leave much room for her husband's. And as time went on, it just became politically convenient to kind of downplay the family's Parsi background, making it even easier to just forget Feroze.
The physical proof of this neglect is honestly heartbreaking. Just a few miles away from Anand Bhawan, the famous celebrated ancestral home of the Nehrus, is his grave, lying in a quiet Parsi cemetery. It's often unadorned, it's just a silent monument to a hero who's been forgotten.
So, when you look at the story of Feroze Gandhi, it's not really just about one man. It kind of forces you to ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? It makes you think about how history gets written in the first place, which stories get told over and over, and which ones just disappear. And maybe the biggest question of all is, why do we as a society choose which heroes to remember and which ones to let fade away?